Well, remember that we have 20 conversion therapy laws that prohibit them from doing anything other than affirming, because that might be considered, this so-called conversion therapy, might be trying to convert them out of being trans. Now, of
So in
course,
essence, in essence, they
yeah,
can lose their license.
they could lose their license. Now, of course, conversion therapy, the reason we passed these bans was to eliminate the really ugly practices of gay conversion therapy. That's how they got passed. But activists inserted gender identity language. So now a therapist can't even say to a child, hold on, I know you say you're a boy, but let's explore some of the other things that seem to be upsetting you.
Are you worried that the slippery slope of this ultimately is that, a child will, a young girl will basically announce that she's trans at school. A parent or the parents will say, well, we're not transitioning you, something like that. And then as the state grows, and again, we're both in California, that literally the state will start taking kids away from their parents. Like, is that something that you think is really legit?
It's already happening. I mean, you especially hear that now, where with divorced couples where they're not on the same page. I've been called by a mother who was, she was divorced, but she had full custody of the daughter because the court deemed her the more responsible, better parent. And when the daughter hit 13, out of nowhere, she decided she was trans with the encouragement of her therapist and her stepmom. And the moment the mom put the brakes on it and said, honey, look, and the mom, who was not gender conforming herself, the mom said, honey, look, you're still a girl. Just because you don't want to dress girly, that's fine. Then a social worker was brought in and decided that the mom was no longer a safe parent.
God, I mean, it's just, it's twisted. It's deeply twisted. What about on the parent side, where we've seen some stories like this? I can think of one from about 2 months ago, where it really seems to be the parent that's driving this, that the stuff we talked about earlier about, oh, you suddenly are getting a lot of likes on Tumblr, or you're feeling like you're in a group suddenly, that we've heard some instances where it seems like the parents are the ones driving their children towards this, because then they sort of by proxy feel popular or liked, or as an oppressed group, they're an oppressed group adjacent or something.
Right. So I think that does happen. The population I really looked at is the biggest population. It's this teen girl population, and there you don't, these are young women who aren't listening to mom at all. In fact, the last thing they want is advice from mom. And so usually in that instance, the parents aren't so much the driver. Sometimes with the little kids, you do see parents who who seem to be pushing this awfully hard, and certainly seem to be bragging about it online in ways that make you wonder if they aren't getting something else out of it.
Yeah. All right. The shrinks are up next. I know that you're not thrilled with the way therapists have dealt with this.
Yeah, I mean, they have an affirmative model right now, the majority. Although I interviewed, a lot of giants in the field who don't agree with it and are not affirmative therapists. But affirmative therapy says we start from the conclusion. We know that we're going to agree with that a young person who says they're gender dysphoric, we're going to agree that that's the right diagnosis. We'll affirm them as transgender. And the only question is, when do we get started on the medications? And that's just not medicine. Medicine is an evaluation of risks and benefits. And the moment you are open about the risks and benefits of any medical treatment, you're not in the gender affirmative camp anymore. You're on my side of things, which is to have an open look and approach with some skepticism how these girls are and whether they're benefiting.
So do you sense that that some of the psychologists or the psychiatrists, that they're actually not telling these young girls what the numbers are in terms of either regretting it later in life, or that it's not going to solve all of your problems, or that suicides are still high? I mean, all of these things that are uncomfortable to talk about. I mean, do you sense that they kind of hide that because they're just on board?
Well, remember that we have 20 conversion therapy laws that prohibit them from doing anything other than affirming, because that might be considered, this so-called conversion therapy, might be trying to convert them out of being trans. Now,
So
of
in
course,
essence, they can lose their license.
they could lose their license. Now, of course, conversion therapy, the reason we passed these bans was to eliminate the really ugly practices of gay conversion therapy. That's how they got passed. But activists inserted gender identity language. So now a therapist can't even say to a child, hold on, I know you say you're a boy, but let's explore some of the other things that seem to be upsetting you.
Yeah, can you clean that up a little bit for people that have no knowledge of any of this? The sort of difference between sexual identity, meaning your sexuality, versus gender identity, and why conversion in each case, or conversion therapy in each case, is not exactly apples to apples.
Sure. So with homosexuality, we've long known that it seems to be innate and immutable. It's not the kind of thing you can sort of convert someone out of or convince them out of, and nor should you want to. I mean, there's nothing unhealthy about a gay life. There just isn't. But when you're talking about the letting a child become comfortable in their own body, because gender identity, if a young woman suddenly says, I'm really a boy, I need to become a boy, you're setting them up to be a lifetime medical patient where they will put testosterone in their bodies. They need to stay on it for life. It has all kinds of terribly extreme side effects. They're highly risky. Unlike, therapy that make her comfortable in her body, today's therapy pushes her to transition. That's very different from being gay, in which all the gay person asks is that you accept them for what they are. What a trans teen asks is, can you help me try to be what I'm not? And that's a much more invasive intervention.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you're talking about this, I'm blanking on whether you mentioned the show in the book. Did you talk about Transparent at all, the show?
No, I didn't.
So there's a line in the last episode of the first season where a woman who's already transitioned says to the main character who's about to begin the process, in effect, this is going to ruin your life. This is going to ruin your family. And that, in many ways, is what the show ended up being about. Now, I know that's not about a child transitioning, but I think a lot of what you're talking about is just that so many people just don't have a holistic view of what this is going to be like on the other side.
That's exactly right. And when I interview transgender adults who are very happy in their transitions very often, they will still tell me, look, this is not easy. It's not easy to go through life on all this hormonal treatment, holding yourself out as a member of the opposite sex. It's really hard. And when transgender adults talk to me about it, they are horrified that teenagers are getting this hormonal treatment so easily without any kind of understanding of the risks, and not appreciating how hard medical transition really is.
So all that being said, Chapter 7 is about the dissidents. There are some dissidents in the field.
That's right. A number of prominent people have stood out and said, hold on, this is way too much, way too fast, with too little medical oversight. Look, the court found, and I interviewed a lot of them, including, Ken Zucker, who chaired the writing of the entry on gender dysphoria for the DSM-5, the classic psychiatric manual on mental disorders. And, these are people who say starting with the conclusion is not medicine, right? And in fact, last week, the British High Court examined the same protocols that they have in place in Britain for gender medicine. And the High Court was appalled. They said, in effect, what's been going on here is likely to transition a lot of young women who are not supposed to be transgender, and a lot of, young people who are likely to experience severe regret.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about women's issues instead of nonstop yelling, check out our Women's Issues playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.